Hi, my name is Winslet, and welcome to my video diving into screenshots I took from the second gameplay stream covering Ways of War, which is the next expansion for Age of Wonders 4 and is coming out November 5th. Just like I've done with previous gameplay streams by the devs, I went through and took screenshots of all the interesting numbers and mechanics that popped up for a few seconds so that we could look at them together. I will have timestamps below, so if you want to jump to any particular topic or concept, you can do so. I will also be posting these images to the official Age of Wonders 4 form, so if you want to look at them all with me, you can use the link in the description below. Important disclaimer, a lot of the numbers we will be looking at today are from relatively early versions of Age of Wonders 4, and the devs recently announced that there will be at least 2 more DLCs for Age of Wonders 4, so these numbers are likely going to change quite significantly. Alright, so now I think we're ready to start diving into these images. I've gone ahead and brought some of the most interesting things to the top of this document so that we can discuss them relatively early, and then I've gone ahead and organized the rest of the images into little categories like the things that you can choose between when a hero levels up. I've gone ahead and put that into one section of the document. So yeah, without further ado, let's talk about the Shade Network, which is something that you can get in the new Tome of Shades. I think they showed off a lot of what you can get in the Tome of Shades in the last dev stream, and they talked about this tome in the last dev diary, but they actually didn't show off the Shade Network anywhere else other than this stream. I believe this image came from the stream, and it basically says that when you build this building, you can get a little bit of extra knowledge income. It's only 10 knowledge income for the basic version of this building, but if you can place the city with this building next to non-owned cities, then you can get a little bit of extra knowledge, but it really doesn't seem like a whole lot, and that seems to be what the devs are saying too. Basically, the knowledge that you get here is not going to pay off the initial investment relatively quickly, and that makes it kind of hard to justify. If you just think about how long it would take 10 knowledge a turn to get back to the 600 cost that you invested into this, that's 60 turns. And if you're lucky and able to actually get 2 non-owned cities adjacent to the city with this structure, that's 30 knowledge a turn, and that would be basically 20 turns to get back just the research investment, and that's not even taking into consideration that you have to invest gold and production into building city structures. So generally speaking, I think this one is not an amazing um, what you call it, city structure or thing to research, but it is worth talking about because it's something we haven't seen so far, or anywhere else rather. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about is their comments on a season pass 3. It's not been confirmed that they will work on the game past the Archon Prophecies DLC and past this season 2 pass, but it does seem likely. It does seem like they're thinking about it already, and one of the things that they want to put in the next season, if they have a season after season 2, is vampires. It doesn't seem like there's any plan to put vampire forms or transformations in season 2, but it does seem like they're very aware that the community would really enjoy vampire forms, and I think that they would really enjoy designing vampires and playing around with vampires themselves based off of what they said. They mentioned that if they get a season pass 3, that it would likely be a chaos themed season, so vampires would fit perfectly into that one. And because this season pass is more affinity focused, vampires just didn't quite have a place to fit into any of their plans for the near future. And they did say that if you look at Archon Prophecy, that there is a good amount of gold associated with it because the Archons are like the good guys in the original Age of Wonders games, and usually have gold associated with them or yellow associated with them. And then this DLC, the Ways of War, their Oathsworn culture does have yellow associated with them. It does have red associated with them a lot, but the I think base Oathsworn culture gives you a little bit of order, and then the subcultures that you kind of change that a little bit. The one exception to this season being a season of order is I think Giant Kings. They're going to be a more Materium focused DLC, but I could see there being some order flavor mixed in there just to have it fit the rest of this season. Maybe the Elder Kings, or what are they called? elder giants, maybe the rulers that we're getting with that DLC, maybe they have some kind of association with order and they're kind of like anti-dragon for that reason. Dragons could be maybe more chaos themed, so who knows? Maybe they could make a story for that to all fit together. um, the next thing that we had actually up here was that they discussed having sky islands as a possibility. I think I saw somewhere that these were like three highlights from the stream that somebody else wrote down on Discord or Reddit or something like that. And one of their big highlights was the fact that they are thinking about maybe adding another layer to the game, kind of like with the Umbral Abyss or the Underground, just so that you have more places to go explore and then use those resources on the other layers to have fun. But it does seem like they're aware that adding more layers is just going to make it harder to keep track of everything that's relevant to a game, and that means that they may not put that in the game. And I'm hoping that um, Sky Islands don't make their way into the game, because I think that we already have enough layers, and it's pretty tricky at times to keep track of all the things that could pop out of, say, like the Umbral Abyss or your underground portals near your cities, while also trying to go fight wars with other players on the map. It's just a lot of things going on all at once. Next image here is about killing momentum. Killing momentum was in the game previously, and from what I can tell, I think it's unchanged. It gives you one action point when killing another unit once per turn, and it only works with melee, magic, or physical range attacks. Maybe there's something I'm missing here, but I feel like that's all the ways that you can attack another enemy. There may be um, abilities that do damage but aren't considered magic, melee, or physical damage, and for whatever reason it doesn't seem like those would trigger the killing momentum. It's right at the bottom of the middle tree, so it does seem like it would take a bit of time to get to. And of course, one of the main differences between all of these things is that you got to spend 1 point on them. Killing momentum, now that I think about it, it used to take 1 point, but it was at the very bottom of um, the level up tree for, I want to say, warfare, the warfare path that we used to have, or currently have, and will be getting rid of with Ways of War. Ways of War will have this new tree system, in case you're not familiar. But yeah, I think we can move on to the next thing, which is a drop that gave cleansing fire as a debuff that you can have on your weapons. And I don't believe that was in the game previously, so people noted that as being really special. Another neat thing about this weapon in particular is if you use the Raise Undead from here with the Raise Undead from the Ritualist Empire, no, level up tree or hero skill tree, then you can get two Raise Undeads on one character, which is pretty good. These things are usually once per battle, so having the ability to use that on two different units across the battle is very useful. It's a lot of utility. We got a couple posts in the Discord over the weekend, and since I recorded the rest of this video on Friday, I figured I would just edit in a quick section relatively early here, going over some of the things that he showed us about dragons. We get to see at level 8 here, you can pick between these different transformations. There's one for each of the affinities, and the one that people were talking the most about was the Primal Dragon, which I'll get to pretty soon. There's some pretty interesting stuff here that Voxel told us about the Primal Dragon, but I don't want to forget to talk about the Materium transformation itself. So let's just quickly go over what this one says. This says you get a little bit more hit points, a little bit more defense, resistance. You get the elemental unit type, and if I remember correctly, that means the dragon can no longer be poisoned or have bleeding, because elementals are things that just don't have the kind of those interactions with them. They're like either a bunch of rocks or ice or water, and those things, as you would imagine, wouldn't bleed. And then you get reinforced, which I think gives you extra armor, and first strike is also pretty good. That allows you to attack, maybe reducing the figures on some units before they get to attack you, and then that would reduce their damage that they would be able to do to the dragon. So this does seem pretty cool. It says that it will unlock immobilizing presence and meteor strikes, which I feel like we could probably figure out what those likely mean based off of other interactions in Age of Wonders 4. I didn't look that stuff up, but I think people could discuss that in the comment section below if they wanted to. Mobilizing presence probably causes things that are standing nearby to be immobilized, and I think meteor strikes would probably. I feel like that's usually something that goes on a ranged thing, so I'm not sure if that would just do splash damage, regardless of how the dragon attacks, but I'm guessing that's how that might work. Okay, so let's really dive into what Avoxel tells us in the Discord itself. It looks like he's saying at um, level 4 they get aspects, at level 8 they get transformations, at level 12 they get changes to their dragon breath, and at level 16 they get something called an elder aspect, which he elaborated more on the elder aspect because people were very curious what that meant. That we've had aspects, transformations, and dragon breath in the game, but this is like a new term, and they told us, Voxel told us basically that the chaos one is going to make it so that you get +2 fire damage or +4 fire damage on non-repeating attacks for each kill that the dragon makes in combat until the end of combat. So it just will allow the dragon to stack up a lot of damage, and I wonder how that works with like friendly summons and like living vines and things like that, because that might be something that you can stack up. But the devs generally think about that kind of stuff, and I felt like with Animus they were able to address the summoning interaction pretty well. And I think I've also seen that Avoxel saying that summoners are not nearly as strong as they were after the changes to the mystic subculture. The summoner one specifically could bring in a lot of units, get a lot of action points pretty quickly and pretty easily. Next, we have a little comment on why the Primal Dragon seems to only be Materium here, and Voxel says it's not only Materium; it was just Materium because he started as Materium. The Primal's transformations affinity is going to be based off of the starting affinity for that dragon. They showed recently that if you take the Nature one, then you get a Blight Breath. Blight damage on the claws, and you get the ritualist class. So there's a couple different starting weapon types for the dragons um, that will also allow you to make uh, your level 8 transformation different for this specific pick, the Primal Dragon. I thought it might have something to do with the primal culture, but apparently not. I think it's just like an interesting use of a similar term that we've seen in the game before. Now, the next thing that they mentioned about this was um, this is not going to be a transformation that gives you something like elemental or plant or fey or um, I think undead might be the one that you get if you take the shadow transformation. This is one that will just like make your guy look like more of a classic dragon. Um, and we also got a few other posts here about this agricultural governor, which is something we haven't seen in the streams or the dev diaries. What I found really interesting is you get 20 renown for just fighting alongside the ruler, which seems like a pretty easy ambition to achieve, and that's repeatable. So you'll be able to get you know 200 renown just after 10 fights. That doesn't seem particularly hard to accomplish. You would also get 200 renown and something called Ruler's Retinue if you just reach level 12, which, if you're farming the map, that happens around turn, I want to say 30 or 40, sometimes earlier if you're really good at that, and sometimes later if like you don't practice as much as some people in the multiplayer server. They also say that the governor bonuses here are really good for growing cities, but what's really interesting about this is that they have payoff for having large populations. So at the third tier, each population grants a little bit of gold, mana, and knowledge, and at the fourth tier, acquiring new pops require 30% less food. So I think what's interesting here is that it seems like it's easy to level this up, but then the uh, benefits only really start to kick in once you get to the third and fourth tier, and then there it's a quite a powerful governor. I think the governors are going to all have very different interactions and play styles, so I'm very excited to actually get to play around more with this. They also said graceful charge is a thing that you can pick in the later on in the skill tree that gives your charge attacks now give you +2 grace for 1 turn, which will allow the hero to just, stay a little bit safer while going on the offense. It's one of the things charged units typically struggle with. Of course, heroes are one of the better things to give charge attacks to because they just can do so much damage. And then I think the last one we got over the weekend was this claw that Avoxel got. It's pretty interesting here. I do like the name a lot. The Sundering Weed Whacker is a great name for a weapon. And it looks like to me that this is really good against plants. It does slowed, does Sundering defense, and it cancels defense mode, which is just like really good. It's like a charge claw. Like, I don't think we've seen anything quite like that in the game before, but that's kind of weapon I want to play around with more and maybe craft into the weapon forge as one of these dragon rulers. Seems really fun. The next set of images that I have here weren't actually from the dev stream, but they were posted on Discord by the developers to show off the difference between the different starts. You can either take a champion, a wizard king, a dragon lord, or an eldritch sovereign. And from what I could tell, the eldritch sovereign looked pretty much the same as what it used to be. It has a little mana upkeep associated with it. But if we go back to wizard kings, I think they used to have some mana upkeep associated with them, or there used to be something different about these. But let's just take a quick second to look at them. I remember champions giving you more gold. It doesn't seem like they give you more gold anymore, but they kept their plus 20% experience and relationships boost with the free city, so it's easier to vassalize them. Um, they also are going to have unique army leadership skills. They're designed to be more of a support role than, say, the Wizard King. The Wizard King is supposed to be more of an offensive battle mage type unit, or um, I guess leader. Wizard Kings have the unique combat spell enhancing heroes. Um, have access to unique combat spells that enhance heroes. They now start off with the channeling ritual, which means we no longer have overchannel. Overchannel's out of the game, I think, or moved into the hero skill may have been what they said at one point later. Think actually did they, yeah, no more overchannel. Oh boy. So what is channeling ritual? Okay, I should be honest, as one of the devs, no more overchannel on start, but I think it's going to basically be in the trees for the Wizard Kings off to the left instead of in the main class area for like ritualist or defender or um, warrior, defender, rituals are the ones that we've seen a lot of so far. I think there's rangers and other things too, but I don't know them all off the top of my head. It sounds like based off what Jordy was saying here that this is going to be similar to command, which gives you, I want to say, your action points back. So it may be able to like reset a unit's cooldown, give them action points, give them damage. I'm not too sure. What do you guys think channeling ritual means based off what Jordy said here and the description that we have here? You can let me know in the comment section below. The next image I wanted to go over was Dragon Lord. From what I could tell, this doesn't seem to say anything too different. I think they may have added something in here about unique combat hero skills or getting extra gold through their Dragon Horde. Maybe you get more gold than you used to because that used to be not a lot of gold. Um, and they have shown off quite a bit about the Dragon Lord. So even though it doesn't seem to look like they're very different, they now all have a class associated with their starting affinity or their starting weapon. And then I think they changed a lot of the things with the level ups because, well, the paths are completely different now. We no longer have a place for just Dragon Lord skills and warfare skills and support skills. We now have the trees with the classes, and then like a general couple things for Dragon Lords. I think should be off to the top left of that tree. If I recall correctly, I think these images here are Jordy's responses to questions regarding the new ruler starts and how they've changed. I'm not entirely sure what this message is about, but he's saying technically an ability with no combat points cost is thus not a spell, must have been something with an ability. So they're saying abilities are like a spell, but he's like, no, if it doesn't have combat casting, then I'm not going to count that as a spell. He says all governor income hero skills have been removed. So if I remember correctly, the feudal um, culture had things that would boost your food production or your uh, is it gold production one of them or knowledge production one of them? I think you could boost those by like 15 or 20 points with a hero level up thing. The Eldritch Sovereigns had the ability to boost their combat casting and their, I want to say, knowledge income quite significantly through a couple hero skills. There was like a beginner one and then like in a more advanced thing that requires the beginner trait. So that sounds like it's out of the game. Um, the Eldritch Summons are less about spell casting and more about manipulation. At least it sounds like they've changed that class a little bit so that it doesn't get combat casting. It's now going to be more about like making units go insane and other things like that through, I don't know, Chaos Pulse. Chaos Pulse was a pretty reliable way to get units to go insane. The last image I have in this screenshot is basically Jordy talking about champions, wizard kings, and dragons. He said champions and wizard kings definitely needed balance changes. I think the champions were just overall a little bit too weak compared to everything else, so it sounds like they'll just be a little bit better. And then wizard kings were just so good with their overchannel ability that would really swing the pacing of a fight. And I think the Eldritch Sovereigns was the other really good choice a lot of people were taking because it also had some things that really could swing the battle. If you use Chaos Pulse and got good results, then it could invalidate an entire army. And of course, the neat thing with Chaos Pulse is you don't know what you're going to get, and sometimes it can kind of invalidate that action for you. It can be almost worthless, and I love that because it's really leaning to the chaos aspect of Chaos Pulse. Not Wizard Kings. Eldritch Sovereigns also had a lot of other things going for them that made them really strong, like the Mass Phantasm Ritual and then just the basic Phantasm Ritual. I think Mass Phantasm Ritual was unparalleled to all the other skills in the game because it could target not just the province that people were standing in, but all the adjacent ones. I think all the other spells that don't just target an army could target everything in a province. So it's just unparalleled in that utility. And there was one other thing. Yeah, the combat casting and other things were very, very good and very, I would say, unique to the Eldritch Sovereigns because I think you got more than just combat casting. You got knowledge out of that ability. But that's out of the game, so that's great. It sounds like things are going to be a little bit more equal between the different starting ruler types. Now, the next thing I have pictures from are from an Intrigue event or Intrigue Events, and I don't know much about them at this point. Sounds like we're going to get to see a lot more of this in the next stream. We definitely will get to see the end of this Intrigue event, and it's possible that we'll get to see more because we're already starting to see one relatively early in the match. So I think there should be enough time for some other stuff to pop up later. It sounds like basically Tempest, the Master of Storm's Tempest, was having some discontent or dissent within their empire, and I'm not entirely sure what triggered that. If it's just like he was having bad relationships with all the other players on the map, or if there was low stability in a lot of their cities. But it's interesting that we get this flavor text at the very least, and then it leads into Mysterious Prisoner, which tells you that if you conquer a city, that basically you're going to free a prisoner. And I have to imagine that means you get another hero unit. It sounds like something that would give you a hero unit if I compare it to certain quest lines in some of the story missions that we've seen previously. So since we don't know more about that, I think we can now move on to events to change ambitions. They mentioned in a previous dev stream, in the one and only previous dev stream, that if you are unable to complete your ambitions, then you're going to get events that allow you to choose something different. So, for example, I don't think they were able to use Dominator to get a really high tier unit in, I don't know, 10 or 15 turns. So then they could either pick Imperialist, Collector, or just stay on the course and try and get that thing eventually. I have to imagine these are a little bit random, but probably quite different from the other one that you have before. There may be some randomness to it, or it may be that they just go to ones that are generally pretty easy to use. Like if we take a look at Imperialist, the minor ambition is to win a battle against a free city. That shouldn't be too hard to accomplish. You can even free cities to win a battle against them. Um, so that'd be 35 renown that you can get pretty easily. I think you need 200 in order to like rank up their ambition bonuses or their governance bonuses, and then you can get 150 renowned and the siege master, I want to say, modifier on your guys by winning a siege battle against a free city. So once again, you could even like free a free city, win a battle that is a siege, and then you've got almost a rank up on the ambition track. Next, we have Collector. They showed off these two things that we haven't seen previously in this menu. We got to see the new Imperialist Ambition and the Collector Ambition. And the Collector wants to have either an item equipped for 5 turns, which is only 2 renown, that's barely anything, or they want to have a full set of tier 2 or higher items. I have to imagine that means filling all of the miscellaneous slots. There's 3 miscellaneous slots, so getting enough tier 2 items to get that sounds like it would take a while, but would be very good if you're able to do that. I don't know what equipment mastery is, but 600 binding essence is a lot of binding essence. That's enough to make at least one tier 4 weapon. And I want to say a tier 4, you could probably get a tier 4 weapon and some tier 3 gear with 600 binding essence. It's enough to do a lot of great stuff with. Now, next we have a screenshot of an honor guard that was copied by a mimic. It does so much damage. Look at this, 42 and 15. What? That is 57, I want to say. Yeah, 57 damage off of a tier 1-ish unit. It's really not. It's like a tier 4, but that's just, I thought it was really funny when they were able to boost up this ability's damage using the mimic, because it's a lower tier unit by 3 tiers. I think it adds like a big percentage, a bigger percentage than it would add to a tier 2 or tier 3 unit that it was mimicking. And after that, we get to see Magelock AI. It seems like the Magelock AI no longer just stands still and takes aim. This one moved forward with the army and then acted relatively efficiently in the combat that we got to see between, I think this was like a Pirate's Cove and Tom's army. The Order of Initiate Shield of Faith option was something that I don't believe we saw in the last dev stream. They showed off all the other things you can get from the Initiate of either Chaos, Materium, or Order, but this one was one that they just never hovered over. I think they mentioned that this is like Despair. It's like a worse version of Despair. Um, it can stack up to -10, so I think that could be better than the way Despair used to work, because it may have been that you could only have -5 and that was it. But it starts off with less initially, which makes sense to me. Morale changes can really impact the way things go, because it not only affects crit chance and fumble chance, but it affects when units will start to run away from a fight. Next screenshot we have here is the Hall of Devotion, which I didn't recognize immediately. This one is kind of like the market, the building that gives you gold for most of the other cultures. The thing that just would give you gold, kind of like how the shrine just gives you mana, has been replaced in the Oathsworn culture with things like the Hall of Devotion. There was something that came before, I forget the exact name, but this is like the second tier that would typically give you plus 20 gold. Instead of 20 gold, now this thing gives you 10 gold and 10 draft, and then when you upgrade it, it would go into the mint, which I think sounds like what the other guys get access to. But my understanding is this will just let you build your units a little bit faster at the cost of not necessarily having as much gold to spend on units or buildings, or I think heroes is one of the other main things that you'd spend gold on. Empire skills won't be changed anytime soon, but Giant Kings should add another way to do empire-wide bonuses, is what Tom said. I don't know why I put the quotation here. This is the quote. I guess my brain was failing me when I wrote through this. But yeah, no, they seem to spend a lot of time in Ways of Wars focused on the heroes and how they level up. So that rework made it so that it was hard for them to look at the Empire skill trees, and I think they wanted to look again at magic materials, try adding some magic materials and other infusions, but they just didn't have the time for it with this one. This content pack is, I think, relatively small when compared to the other things that we're going to be getting um, in Giant Kings and Archon Prophecy. But it's kind of hard to know because I don't know if they've actually posted individual prices for each of the DLCs yet. We just know it's $50 to get the season pass through. At least that's what I remember seeing last. Now we're ready to jump into the Tome of Calamity. This is actually something that I believe was shown off in the dev diary, but when I saw this, I had to take a picture because it's really cool. It's really cool and worth highlighting that when you build this building after, researching a tier 4 tome, so you're not going to get it too early, but after you build it, you're going to be able to recruit a cursed ogres, a cursed blades, and a cursed tricksters. That's a tier 2, a tier 3, and a tier 4 unit. You can get a tier 5 unit from, I want to say there's a summon Calamity Dragon underneath here, just like there's a summon Prosperity Dragon, and their shrine will also do something similar for Prosperity, where they give you a tier 2, a tier 3, and a tier 4 unit that you can build after you make the building upgrade. It's interesting that this will alter the train into Desolate. That I think will be very good for, I think it's called Ash Sabertooth Primals. Those that subculture for the primal culture should be able to get a lot of synergy out of this. So I can't wait to see people play around with that. Next, we have the Shepard ability, which used to be in the Tome of Evolution, and it looks like they have just moved that out into the general pool of hero skills that people can start with. You can see here that it says Shepard. I don't believe they hovered over Shepard to show off the effect. It used to be that evolution units would get, I think, extra armor, extra experience, and they would I think maybe have reduced upkeep as well, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, now it's just going to be something like Delver or Duelist, and that to me says that's the ambition thing, right? It's when you complete your ambitions, you get something. So maybe after you evolve a certain number of units, then you can get some of the old Shepherd bonuses that we used to have in the game. Taunt sounds like it's a little bit different. I think they made it so that it is actually range 4 now and not 3, and that's for the heroes and the anvil guards. It's not just the heroes. They wanted to make it that way, I think based off feedback they got in the beta, that the taunt on heroes is not particularly useful compared to other hero level up things, and that if you just gave it a little bit more range, that would be better because you want to keep your heroes relatively safe. They sometimes you want to throw them in the very front of your army and have them tank a lot of things, and the taunting heroes generally probably would benefit from that a little bit, but uh, the consensus seems to be that 3 range was not good enough for the heroes, and now they're noticing 4 range is too good on anvil guards. That's a lot of range on just like a tier 1 unit to be able to like pull people across the map to engage with them when they could have other targets that are better for them to be fighting. The fact that it lasts for 3 turns, I think, is something they want to change too. It seems like, based off of the conversation they were having with chat, they want to make that maybe 2 turns or 1 turn, but 1 turn sounds like it wouldn't be worth it. I think with range 4, 1 turn is perfectly fine. Like on an anvil guard, that is. But if you're gonna keep it at range 4, I don't even know if 2 turns is fair enough because this is cooldown 1. Maybe if you tweak it to make it cooldown 3 or 4, then you can keep it on taunt 2 turns range 4 on the anvil guards, but it just seems too good even at that point. It's a tricky thing to balance. I'm not a big fan of taunt in general. I kind of wish it wasn't in the game, but it seems like something other people enjoy. So yeah, they won't get rid of things people enjoy, right? Because that'd make them a little sad, a little angry maybe. Upgraded lightning evocation, I think, is something that they didn't show off in the tree, but we got to see on an enemy hero. They mentioned that this thing is, I think, able to do more than just the sunder resistance and electrify that they used to do. I think now it jumps to 3 other units within 3 hexes instead of 2 other units within 3 hexes, and it does more. It does some sundering defense on top of that. It has cooldown 2, and yeah, maybe the damage output was boosted as well. I'm not too sure just looking at this stuff, but it seems generally pretty good. The next set of images that I have here have to do with the choices you get when you are leveling up a hero with the Ritualist class. And before we really dive into them, I wanted to mention that a voxel said on the Discord that the new Ranger class will have a skirmisher path in its tree, kind of like how the Ritualist class has 4 little paths or legs that you can go down here. The first one on the left has to do with healing and this restore skill. The middle one here has to do with wild growth, which is kind of like a summon, but it doesn't bring in units until you get further down here. It basically creates flora. And then I think this one has to do with just summoning units in general. And the one on the right has to do with undead interactions. So instead of summoning in new units, it might have more to do with reviving old units. With that being said, I do think there is a revive somewhere in the level ups for restore. So let's just go through these. Um, the restore here is, I think, unchanged from the previous version of the game. The first one that you pick in the top left here will make it so you get a little bit of healing, you get some regeneration. All the negative status effects are removed on a single target, and there's a cooldown of 2 with a range of 4 here. The Resurrecting Restoration, I want to say, is the little skull in the bottom left here. Yeah, this is gonna make it so that you can revive a unit with 60% of its HP. And I think that could be on cooldown too. So you can revive things fairly often, fairly efficiently, with a few points in the Rituals class. 1, 2, 3, 4, I think should be enough for you to get that interaction in general, unless I'm missing something here. Empowered Restoration says that if you take this one, I think that looks like maybe this top left one here, the healing will be a little bit more. You'll get 20 more HP temporary hit points instead of just the 10. You'll get some strengthened on that unit, and there's extra range on this ability. So instead of using it from 4 hexes away, you can actually use it from 8 hexes away, keeping your hero a little bit further away from the danger, or keeping them safer for a longer amount of time. The next skill here says that Swift Restoration will make it so Restore has no cooldown and leaves 1 action point after use. And I have to admit, I'm not quite sure if I'm understanding this skill, because if you have cooldown 0, that means you just need to place this guy between all of your units that are damaged, and then you can heal them up to max hit points. They'll have a bunch of regeneration, like pretty much infinite regeneration, and they'll have no negative status effects as long as they're able to get close enough to this guy. That seems very good, and I think it is something that appears pretty far down the tree. It looks to me like it's appearing when you go to this arrow, and that overflowing restoration is just to the left of that, and this will basically be an AoE, which is very good, very powerful, but when I'm comparing it to Swift Restoration, I'm not sure if it's quite as good. Let's see if we can find this in the other tree. So yeah, here's the arrow that points off to the right for, I want to say, Swift Restoration, and then just to the left of that is Overflowing Restoration right here. So you can get those relatively early, actually, just looking at the tree a little bit. Overflowing Restoration, I think, works like the Nymph's AoE Dispel, and like the Summer Fairies Dispel, or like the thing that you could get through the Tome of Fertility. I think Revitalize used to do something very similar to this. This is going to be able to remove negative status effects in an AoE with a cooldown 2. I mean, if that one's got a cooldown 0, why does this one have a cooldown of 2? That seems like not nearly as good. Maybe it's because the first choice is slightly weaker, and the way they all interact with each other is important. So after that, at one point, I think we got to see Undying Loyalty was this little circle, I believe, just at the bottom here, underneath the Restoration tree, and this will make it so that you can make a friendly unit have Steadfast for 1 turn, and there's a cooldown of 4 on this because that's a very strong ability. If I remember correctly, Steadfast can be removed, but it's a little bit tricky because there's more things that remove negative status effects from friendly units than there are things that just remove status effects from enemies. But I do remember somehow seeing somebody removing Steadfast from a unit, so I do think this thing can be dispelled. But yeah, it makes sense where it is. It's a very strong ability. The conjure wildgrowth is something that's going to create obscuring flora in a 1 hex radius. It will also heal friendly units in that radius as well as provide them with bolstered defense. But I could see this just being good for creating an obstacle that the enemy has to walk through in order to get closer to your ranged units. If you've got ranged units that can shoot melee units that are stuck in on all this wild growth, then you're in a pretty good position. The fact that this is cooldown 2 and can't be used in water battles does mean that there's going to be some situations where you can't get this to work when you need it to, but I think generally it sounds pretty cool and pretty interesting and different from things we've had in the game up until this point. Enveloping wild growth is saying enemy units in an area will have a chance of being blind and immobilized. When you combine the fact that this gets a very good chance of applying blind with the Tome of Shades interactions that make you do a lot more damage against blind units, you've got a lot of synergy here that I'm really interested to see um, how a lot of these things play together. Uh, from the classes we haven't seen with like tomes we've had for a long time and some of these new tomes. It just seems like a really neat little interaction that you can get pretty early in your level ups in this tree in the ritualist hero level tree. The swift wild growth seems really cool. It says that the wild growth now has no cooldown and leaves 1 action point after use. So that reminds me a lot of what we were seeing with the restoration thing. I think you just put your guy in the middle of your units and you just create wild growth all around them, and that should keep the enemy from being able to move towards you easily, as well as allow you to. I think this one says, yeah, it heals, so you could just keep healing your guys up forever. And maybe you can't target where there's already flora, but I could see that being something that potentially you could do based off of the descriptions that we see here. The rejuvenating wild growth says that friendly units in the area of the wild growth conjuring will get some more hit points, I think, as well as regeneration. That is one of the first picks that you can get after you get wild growth. I think it's the bottom left one, and then there's a little skull one that you can pick that is hostile wild growth. This one will create uh, the ability to poison enemies and apply bleeding on them. So I have to imagine that the blinding and immobilize, that's probably in the same path, right? Could be the foot one right there. I think that would make a lot of sense based off what we've seen. The living wild growth is really, really interesting. The fact that you can summon in 3 living vines using this ability means that it should be pretty easy to shut down support units, range units, and battle mages using this ability, because it's not like the I want to say conjure living vines that comes from Tome of Roots, which puts 5 units in a 2 hex radius, which means that you take a dice roll with that one a lot of the time and just hope that it goes next to the units that are important. If you're doing something in a 1 hex radius, you can put the most important unit in the middle of the radius, and then you're going to get some living vines around it, as long as there's open spots in the 6 spaces around it. But of course, when you're doing this, you want to make sure you're using your ability in a way that allows you to get all 3 living vines. So keep that in mind. All right, so the next path we're going to go through is the ones that have to do with summon Astral Ward. The first level here will give you an immobile Astral Ward, and if I remember correctly, these guys basically will link to a unit, making it so that unit doesn't take damage before the Astral Ward dies, and that means that the Astral Ward doesn't last 3 turns, and it's generally not a very good spell, or it wasn't a very good spell in the previous versions of Age of Wonders 4. After you take this one, you can pick Fortified Summons, which says units summoned by this hero will have 10 more hit points, which isn't amazing. I think that'll have more value on the lower level summons than it will on the higher level summons that just have higher HP pools to start off with. But I think once you combine this with some of the other things that you start to see, this path starts to look very tempting and very good. It just may not have the best stuff off initially. The Conjure Lesser Spirit says you get a random tier 1 spirit next to this unit, and that will last for 3 turns. When I see this, I think of the Mystic's ability to summon in a unit based off of their last spell, and I think that if they still have access to that and they can get access to this seems like a lot of actions that they can get relatively quickly and relatively easily, and it might be kind of tricky to play against somebody who really leans into the summoning aspect of this ritualist tree. But I don't know, we haven't played around with it yet. Um, the Conjure Greater Spirit says that this replaces the skill Conjure Lesser Spirit, and then you basically get the tier 3. This is, from what I can tell, pretty much what the signature skill used to be for Materium. There was a Materium summon elemental that would do a random tier 3, and I used to love that one. So it's neat that you can get that just from leveling up now, and you don't have to spend your signature skill on it. There's other things that you get to choose between now for signature skills. If I remember correctly here, I think a lot of these are actually things that have to do with stuff from above, but I forgot to move them up earlier. So this says now support abilities now heal for 10 HP, and in effect to their regular effects. That's not bad. It's incompatible with the other supporting things like regenerating support, and I think bolstering support I did show off earlier. So you can make it so it applies just regeneration on all of the hero's support abilities, which isn't bad because there's a lot of things that do AoEs that allow you to apply a lot of regeneration through things like this. Bolstering defense was actually one I didn't show off. So it looks like here this says you can just give yourself a little bit of bolstered resistance from support. So yeah, this is all restore stuff, isn't it? So the first 3 choices you get with the restore aren't going to really impact things too dramatically. When they went to level up, at one point they did see the Shadow dedication. The Initiate of Shadow can get +2 damage on flanking attacks. These effects are raised or increased for non-repeating attacks. And then, of course, you get the choice between soul draining strikes and frost strikes when you take the Initiate of Shadow. I'm not sure why I placed that in here. It must have come up while they were looking at the trees. Looks like Cody was confused. How is this supposed to stack if you can only have one army leader? I'm confused. Me too. Is there something I'm missing here? That must have been a reply to something else they were talking about in Discord. All right, so now we can dive into the raise undead part of this tree. We've seen this skill as is in the game before. Now we have some other things that go with it. This will summon in a zombie at the start of the battle. Doesn't work in water combat. The summon will remain for 3 turns. Sounds like not amazing. I like getting the crowbow, so I have an extra unit to keep the enemy busy really while my real army gets into position. So this could be good for that. I kind of wish that these things that summon in units at the beginning of the battle lasted for more than 3 turns. I kind of wish they lasted for 4 turns, but I think that that could also be kind of annoying to play against too, because if you had the Zombie Keeper, the Crowbow, and maybe the Umbral Disciples, which gives you a Splitterling, and those all lasted 4 turns, that would be that's like having half of another stack. Of course, they're pretty bad units, tier 1 units, but I still think the person who can summon in more units and get more actions is in a pretty good position, and they generally win a lot of fights because, well, they can do more damage in a turn if they have more actions, generally speaking. Infested Summon says that units summoned by this hero have Aura of Disease and status effect immunity disease, which sounds dangerous. That sounds really dangerous unless you're playing the Mire Crocodile, which makes it so that the units that you have, your racial units, your starting units, the baseline ones, will have immunity to disease. And if your summons are able to pass disease to your enemy could just like use that thing that got infected to stand next to their enemy, you, and then the disease just spreads onto your units, which is really not good because that makes it so that magic damage deals a lot more damage. I want to say it's like -4 resistance or something like that. And yeah, it seems like a pretty big dice roll. Of course, a lot of summons do magic damage, so that can be good unless you get like the Materium guy who does physical damage, or I think the Tide, which also does physical damage. The Tide Spirit, I think, is the water one that you can't really summon in easily. Or yeah, I don't think you can summon him in, but you can get him from events and pickups and things like that. The summon a bone wyvern at the start of the battle doesn't work in combat, and it looks like something that is pretty far down the tree. It's to the left of the skull of the zombie keeper. So once you have zombie keeper, you can then take bone wyvern as your next thing, but it doesn't take you further down the tree. It's kind of like an offshoot. This summon replaces the zombie keeper. Bone wyverns are a tier 2, so not bad, but I don't see that being worth a hero skill point. I think that there's other better choices on the left side of the path. And then this is something that is from, I think, the hero class. The Grim Executioner was something that I don't believe we've seen beforehand, but was in the game. I don't think we'd seen it in this tree yet, but it was something that was in the game and before Ways of Wonder or the free update that's going to come out alongside it. After that, we have Berserker's Rage. You have a choice here. Basically, you get Grim Executioner or Berserker's Rage. Berserker's Rage is pretty cool because it will give a unit steadfast when their HP is reaches 33% or lower. So this is very nice in auto combat. That can allow your guys to get low HP and do a lot of damage and then finish the fight before they're able to go down to 0 or drop to 0. Generally, your hero can be in a lot of danger if he's like a melee guy and has a lot of things that let him reposition close to the enemy. So having something like a Berserker's Rage in that situation is very, very valuable. So this next image here has to do with the new Adept signature skills. The way you unlock them is not by unlocking the initiate, but rather by having 4 affinity points in that affinity. Right now you can see that they have 6 chaos affinity, 3 materium affinity, 2 order affinity, and 1 shadow affinity. If they had just one more in the chaos affinity, they would have the choice between these 4 things and the Adept of Materium. You would be able to choose either Initiate of Materium or Adept of Materium. One is not a prerequisite for the other, which wasn't immediately obvious when you look at this image because it almost looks like you need the Initiate of Chaos to get to the Adept of Chaos, but that's not the case. You just need the affinity points. The Chaos dedication says, while army leader, all non-hero units in the army gain extra crit chance, extra 10% crit chance. This thing stacks. So it's like if you have other sources of crit chance, you'll get more. And I think I saw some people saying that it seems like it shouldn't be too hard to get to 100% crit chance on certain builds using interactions like this. When you take the Adept of Chaos signature skill, you'll unlock the ability to get the Debilitating Aura or the Chaos Empowerment thing in the hero level up tree. There'll be like 2 choices here on the left that you can pick between, and we didn't get to see Debilitating Aura, so we don't really know what that does at this point, but we did get to see the Chaos Empowerment. This says that base attacks gain plus 10% crit chance, and those attacks, when they crit, will inflict 5 fire damage and apply burning to the target and adjacent enemies. So it's not just applying the 5 damage and the burning to one target, it can apply it to adjacent enemies when you crit. So I think from my understanding here, this is saying basically the hero that is giving crit chance to everybody else in the army can have equivalent amount of crit chance as long as it's using its base attack and not using things like lightning evocation. And then if you're able to get the crit chance on those base attacks, you get a nice little something extra to make up for the fact that it's not going on all of your abilities. It's just going on your base attacks. The Warbound was something that we got to see a little bit in the dev diary, but I was just looking at it and noticing a few little differences between the numbers that we see here on the Flaming Charge Strike and this guy's Flaming Charge Strike. It looks like it's just 24 damage here, and then the Bulldoze would be, I think it's saying 10. The numbers seem like they're higher over here, and I think this was after they were able to get to the Paragon level of devotation on the strife, the strife subculture for Oathsworn, so that could be where the extra damage is coming from. Maybe I'm missing something here, but another thing that I noticed is they didn't actually give us the description of Bulldoze on the dev diary where they did talk about this. They did mention that you can move forward and attack afterwards, which is quite nice. This seems to be indicating that it's not using your action point by having like a lighter circle here. A light blue circle, I think, indicates that you'll have a single action afterwards. And this is actually really neat because you can go to the edge of your movement and then move another 4 hexes through enemies or not. Maybe you're just using this on well, it's always hits one range, so you can't target somebody who's standing 4 hexes away from you to do your charge that way, it would appear, unless you use the targeting the ground with the alt button. Maybe that will work, maybe it won't. I'm not too sure just looking at it. But yeah, the damage does seem higher for some reason here. Maybe they had an enchantment on the guys that I'm missing here. Oh yeah, Inner Mastery might be giving the extra damage here that we see on Bulldoze, and there may be some Searing Flames on there, but I'm not too sure. Just looking at the base attack. Infernal Blaze, it is going to, yeah, give you the Infernal Might, which they did talk about in here, so we don't need to really talk about it too much. I think we can jump into the last few images. One of them was Jordy responding to a question about the Shade's weapon, the throwing dagger, and how it doesn't sound like that would be in the item forge. And Jordy basically just confirmed there's no weapon based on the Shade, but I could see that totally making its way into the game. That seems reasonable. They already have the animations for it, so it shouldn't be too hard to bring over to heroes. All right, and then here we have Jordy saying that considering that their beta wanted to lower tome requirements because of the dual tomes being slightly problematic, he wanted to wait to see what camp reigns supreme. And there was somebody here, he said in their example, you just pick one dual tome and you miss the 6 affinity required for just a tier 4 tome, and that sounds like it could be a problem because they've taken out other ways to get affinity points through the ruler. So yeah, I'm curious how people will feel about this after playing with it too. If you have any thoughts that you want to share, you feel free to in the comment section below. The last few things were things that they just kind of talked about at the end of the stream. I did talk about this earlier. We don't need to talk about that. Luis said that he's working on a herald, like the Herald of War, but for a different affinity. So I don't know when that's going to come to play. I would assume that is actually more for the Giant Kings DLC because it sounded like he was already thinking about some of the things for that. When it comes to development, he said that he was working on a new transformation for a future DLC, so that's why I was thinking maybe the Herald of Guardian has, or rather Herald of Guardian. I don't know what it is. That'd be funny if it was called Herald of Guardian. Um, I think this Herald, whatever it is, whatever affinity it is, will probably be somewhat associated with this transformation that we're getting in the future DLC. And yeah, just because the Giant Kings would be the next one after Ways of War, I think that makes the most sense based off what they were saying here. Tom said that we didn't get everything that's in the descriptions for Giant King and Archon Prophecy that will be in Giant Kings and Archon Prophecy. They kept those descriptions generally pretty short because they didn't want to commit to more than they could accomplish. And yeah, the last thing I wanted to go over was how they said that the main story with Lilith and Urath will mostly be continued in Archon Prophecy. I don't know if we're getting a story realm in Giant Kings. I would imagine that there is something like that, but it could be that the story realms are actually being saved for Archon Prophecy. But yeah, that's everything I have for you today. I'll see you around. Have a good one.